This video is sponsored by Audible.
Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are talking Dragonflight, the new World of Warcraft expansion which is coming to your PC in just, and specifically we are talking the Titans, we are talking the Legion and the Sundering, Tyr the Watcher, Stony Tony the beautiful Sage Perfect statue stan, and we are talking the return of the dragon aspects to the Dragon Isles, because today Internet, we are doing a deep dive cinematic analysis of the Dragonflight trailer to work out exactly what's going on, you know, because there is a surprising amount going on. And the usual disclaimers apply. This is not a reaction video. I've watched this cinematic an unhealthy amount of times now. If you haven't seen it, this video is going to be a very bad way of doing so, because we are going to be stopping and starting, skipping bits and talking all over the top of it and just generally having a lovely old nerdy time picking it apart. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, join us as we ask, why did the Dragon Isles wake up? Why did it take so long? What clues can this cinematic give us about the upcoming expansion? And who is everyone? And what's going on? Seriously though, okay? Go, 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 go. We will see throughout this analysis that this cinematic is full of meaningful contrasts, and that starts right at the very beginning here in the opening shot with the caption, 10,000 years ago. An unfeasible amount of time for us here on Earth. 10,000 years ago, the Neolithic era hadn't even begun in Europe. We weren't even using metal tools in Europe. 10,000 years is so far in the past as to be basically incomprehensible to most of us, and yet, over that caption, we hear the buzz and throb of what is clearly advanced technology, which, okay, there was a moment when I first saw this where my blood froze for a second, because with the gold, almost gate-like shape, it did kind of look like the Zereth Mortis portal, and I thought this expansion was going to be called Shadowlands 2 First One's Boogaloo. But no, of course, this is Titan technology, which is absolutely, like, obviously, totally different.
The world has been sundered. It cries out in pain.
And then we get another quite jarring contrast in the next shot as Alexstraza's voiceover kicks in and we see what we come to learn is the majestic looking Dragon Isles, a pristine utopia with beautiful raised canals and absolutely jaw-dropping topography, a crystal blue sea glinting in the blazing sunlight set against, as the camera pans up, the gathering storm clouds in the distance and that unmistakable green fell glow. And we know exactly what Alexstrasza is talking about here, because 10,000 years is not an arbitrary or random number to World of Warcraft players. We all know it to be when the War of the Ancients and the Sundering took place, when the Well of Eternity was destroyed and the planet shattered into the many different continents and isles that form it today. And as a piece of scene composition, it's obvious what the intent is here. As the camera pans up, our attention as a viewer is supposed to be drawn to the devastation on the horizon, and that dangerous green fell storm in the distance is almost like a beacon of its own, like a danger beacon, drawing, as we shall see, the dragons towards it.
We must go to its aid. We entrust our ancestral home to you, the Watchers.
Because as Elden Ring's Stone Zoo Sky looks up at their own beacon, the top of it, which we just saw, is obscured by the blinding light of the heavens to maybe suggest to us how this device was bestowed upon these Stone Watchers by a higher power. And through that obscuring bright light, we see the faint, distorted outlines of the dragons, zooming off over the pristine stone of their home towards the danger. A shot that will be recreated in reverse later. I really want to take a moment here to really appreciate the design of these Watchers, because Titan constructs come in a variety of flavors, some of them these days kind of sci-fi looking, but making these particular Watchers as unrobotic as possible, scraping, heavy, almost stop-motion animated statues as opposed to, say, Mother's much more modern look, they give a sense of just how long ago this action is taking place. Likewise with the architecture choices of the buildings here themselves, which we'll talk about later, and that is a purely dramatological logical decision, because in WoW history terms, there's no real difference in age between the ultra-modern looking mother and these guys, but we as an audience associate the features of these watchers, their similarity to Greek statues, wearing togas with stylistically curled beards, as being older because of our own lived experience. And the filmmakers want this to feel like a long time ago, so that's the style they use. And I'm glad they do. I feel like there's a sense with Dragonflight as an expansion that it's an effort to take WoW back to its roots in lots of ways, and these stony guys definitely help that. I love how their eyes glow orange, but are clearly still stone underneath. They look awesome, I love them, and one in particular. I also want to say how much I love the silence of the Watchers. Obviously there's a voiceover narration going on in this cinematic, but regardless, it's honestly not even clear if the Watchers can talk. Whether they can or not, it's obvious they don't need to. And the fact that they don't helps to portray their clearly understood shared purpose. No discussion is needed. They know what's expected of them and what they've got to do. These are some dedicated employees. And we can tell Stone Zeus is in charge here because while his mate looks out, aghast to the alien sight on this horizon, Beardy is clearly one step ahead and making the decision to act, starting up some serious Titan tech.
The land slumber, hidden even from our own eyes.
And as the beacon splits in half to power down, and the whole ancient magical isle is immersed in obscuring cloud and darkness, we catch some more glimpses of just how beautiful and dramatic a landscape it is as the rich colours bleed out of it and a kind of eternal night falls upon it. And the Watchers take their posts with this stunning framed shot of Tony, the Watcher at the shore, and what was just moments ago a lush green utopia is now cold and threatening. You realize just how spiky those rocks are, and you see those jagged blue crystals, icicles, for the first time, and there's an emphasis on the stillness that takes hold. If you hadn't just seen them moving around, then these Watchers could easily just be normal statues there for decoration. Well, I say normal, can we take a moment to appreciate just how massive these guys are actually? This shot seems to depict the Azure Span zone, and we know from screenshots those trees are massive, but the Watchers absolutely dwarf many of them. These guys are giants. And let's really listen to what Alexstraza says in this opening.
You will feel our return in the waking of the land. Then you must light the beacon of Tyrshold, lest the path home be lost to us forever.
Because I think it helps us understand one of the big questions about this cinematic. Namely, why do the Dragon Isles sleep so long, and why do they wake up when they do? Wouldn't it make sense for them to wake up after the Legion are defeated at the end of the War of the Ancients? But you will feel our return in the waking of the land actually suggests that when the dragons return later in the cinematic, oh, spoilers, sorry, the dragons return, it is not because the land has woken up. The land has woken up because the dragons are trying to return. It's not the location of the Dragon Isles that the beacon shows the dragons, it is the path in. That's what Alexstraza's line suggests, and it fits in with how the dragons arrive so quickly after the beacon is lit again after. They were already there, that's why the land woke up. They just couldn't get in because the path wasn't lit by the beacon. Anyway, back to 10,000 years ago, and we see our trusty Watchers shutting down, and I know I don't have to point this out, but the design of the Watchers is, for me, the single greatest triumph of this entire cinematic. Because whoever designed these guys to look so sad is a literal genius who deserves their own statue on Blizzard campus, and not a sad-looking one, a happy one, because they did so well. Because those kindly, troubled eyes, and the broad, open faces, and the flat, broken noses convey strength and vigilance, but also somehow vulnerability and care, and just make them so full of character and relatability. And yes, they might look a little bit like the Jolly Green Giant, and yes, they might look a little bit like the talking bust from Art Attack, but I love all those things, so that just makes me love the Watchers even more. You. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Taliesin, are you going to address that this is called the Beacon of Tyrshold? And that is a very good question. And yes, I am, but again, we'll get to that. The time skip to bring us to the present day is exquisite. as the island settles into an eerie silence and we focus on Tony. Beautiful, sad, kind-eyed Tony. The smash cut forward 10,000 years to show him unmoved but now weathered, cracked and mossy does so much to portray not just the time that has passed, but also how untouched and abandoned the Isles have become in that time. It seems more dangerous somehow. The hills behind are darker, their silhouettes more stark. That 10 millennia's worth of weathering though serves to soften the more angular of Tony's features and make him even more open and relatable. Oh, it's too much. And when he does wake up, it's accompanied by this kind of massive gyroscopic whir, like someone is cranking on the battery of the whole island, and Tony literally snaps back into consciousness once more. His view out across the bay exactly as he left it 10,000 years ago. Except he opens his beautiful dusty eyes just in time to see the sun start to break through the clouds. The Isle is awakening, which means the dragons are returning and they need their path lit. And that makes Tony happy. And that makes me realize all I want in my life is for Tony to be happy. Because now life can go back to being sunny and golden and perfect, just like it was before. And a note on the music here. It's the opening theme from the Dragonflight zone in Wrath of the Lich King, which is a very interesting choice. We will get to some of the possible deeper meanings later, but let's keep it simple for now and point out that the expansion name, Dragonflight, is basically the exact opposite of Dragonblight. One is the dragons being damaged, spoiled, or otherwise subdued. Dragonflight suggests a liberation, a freedom for the dragons, which, as we will see, the Dragon Isles ultimately represents. So it's another one of those contrasts that this cinematic pushes so strongly. But let's make it even more simple. The piano motif of Dragonflight just makes really good waking up music. It is extremely reminiscent, to me at least, of the iconic Legend of Zelda sound effect. A series of games that more often than not begin with Link waking up. And if you really did want to make your players feel like we were returning to a more old school video game RPG aesthetic and approach, Zelda would kind of be the perfect series to subtly try and evoke. And as Tony happily looks around to his stony bros, we notice that there is a strange supernatural glow in the water that was not there before. There's just something about this whole scene that feels slightly off, which is explained as we get the reverse shot of that other watcher to see that his face has been completely weathered away. And so this particular stone bro will not be joining our reunion. And as Tony the Awoken looks back at the Isle he has been vigilantly guarding, or at least, standing up, sleeping on, for the last 10 millennia, we see with him that it is not the idyllic haven that we remember. The years of lifelessness have led to it falling into disrepair and neglect in a way that has left it feeling unstable, and if the tremors and lava spilling out of the rocks are to be believed, on the brink of serious natural disaster. There's this wonderful moment of realization with just the slightest change in facial expression, where he and we work out that we do really seem to be alone right now, and the, you'd have to say, stony resolve that writes itself across his face means he realizes the important job of checking on the beacon falls to him. And as he makes his way up the rumbling hills that are awakening and coming back to life in a very elemental, dangerous, disordered, and most untitan way, we see that, well, A, Tony is obviously not a herbalist because he does not stop to pick up any of those sprouting flowers, despite it being day one of the expansion, and then probably getting really good prices in the auction house. And although Tony is obviously very familiar with all these surroundings, we definitely get a sense that none of this is his job. Going into the facility and turning on the beacon is clearly way above above his pay grade, but as he climbs higher and higher, literally stepping up, and as he sees more and more ex-Watchers fallen to ruin, as he sees and walks through the raw elemental force of the Isles beginning to overwhelm the Titan's creation, that sense of shared purpose kicks in and takes him all the way to the top of the tower. And I touched on this earlier with the design of the Watchers, but I want to say how much I love the old school Titan architecture of the tower here. It really does harken back to past, more golden age WoW expansions like, fittingly, Dragonflight in Wrath, or of the Storm Peaks, or Ulduar. What's Ulduar built on top of again? I can't remember. I'm sure it's not important anyway. And as Tony looks up at the faded beacon, this is another contrast, mirroring that earlier shot where Stone Zeus looks up at it, bright and obscured by almost divine light, now grey and vulnerable looking. And a contrast in our protagonist as well, from Stone Zeus, the obvious leader of these Watchers, powerful and capable and wise and with a massive Burger King beard, contrasted with Tony, a much less powerful and unimportant foot soldier who has this responsibility thrust onto him because, yeah, sorry, Stone Zeus. And I know what you're thinking. You've got two big questions right now. The first is, Tally, why are you calling the little Watcher that could Tony? I've read Steve Danuse's tweets. I know his name is Watcher Koranos, and I know that too. But you see, I just started calling him that during the live stream reveal of the cinematic because, you know, he was obviously important and I felt like our hero needed a name that I could refer to him as. And Tony is obvious, isn't it? Because it's kind of Mediterranean sounding, and also because he's stony. Like the beacon, Tony. That's his name, Tony. Yeah, Stony Tony. So he's Stony Tony now, okay? And I know your second question is, so Taliesin, Stone Zeus, that's Tyr, right? I've seen a lot of people online saying that's Tyr, and okay, let's take a pause and look at this. I can see why some people think this is Tyr. He lives in Tyrshold, after all, which very closely resembles the architecture in the Storm Peaks, which Tyr built. Tyr very famously lost a hand fighting Galakrond. When we see Stone Zeus all dead and busted, he is very noticeably missing a hand. Plus, Tyr is the Watcher who got all of the dragon aspects together to fight Galakrond in the first place, and later convinced the other Watchers to imbue them with Titan power, turn them into the aspects. So why wouldn't he chill in the Dragon Isles, just looking after it? It makes sense, but it's not Tyr, as in it's like just 100% not. For one, Tyr was dead long before the sundering ever happened. Dead and buried at Tyrsfall, or Tyr's Fall. And two, I don't need a two because he's dead and buried at Tyrsfall. This is just definitely not him. The structure is called Tyrshold because, well, like I say, it's quite feasible he built it for the dragons. What do Titan Keepers often build facilities on top of again? I forget, but I'm sure it's not important anyway, so ignore me. Or it could just have that name because the dragons all love Tyr. He is like their splinter or whatever. But no, alas, this is not Tyr. Oh, and I know a third question you are thinking. Why are all the other Watchers, except Tony, dead? Were they attacked? And that is a really interesting question, honestly, which led me to some of the most important thinking that I did on this cinematic. Because I think the implication absolutely is just that the Watchers have collapsed through time and erosion from the elements. But don't forget that in Warcraft, the elements doesn't quite mean what it means to us here on Earth in real life. The elementals and the elemental lords are one of the first things that the Titan Watchers brought under control when they were put on Azeroth. Tyr himself fought and defeated Ragnaros back in the day. We see in this cinematic that as the power of the sleeping Watchers wanes on the Dragon Isles, the elements, cold frigid winds, violent seas, bubbling lava bursting from the rock have become more powerful. We know that the first raid of Dragonflight will be against the primal incarnates. So whereas, yeah, I think it is just time and the elements that have weathered away the other Watchers here, I don't think think that is necessarily incidental or especially natural on the part of the elements, you know? And it's easy to see why the elements might have a grudge as well. Let's take a second look at the beacon itself. Now, if I were to ask you, where does this beacon draw its power? You would say from the Earth to light up the orb at top. And that's a perfectly reasonable assumption, yeah. But if you look at it, it's not actually true, because the beacon's energy flow down from the orb. The orb doesn't draw power from the Earth. The Titan power of the orb is thrust into the Earth, perhaps to suppress or control or even imprison. I seem to remember other things being imprisoned below Titan facilities in the past, but I can't remember what they are, and I'm sure it's not important anyway. And while the beacon, the orb, is split, that power is much reduced and not controlling or suppressing the elemental forces of the Earth. Can you see what I'm saying?
Hey everyone, I don't know about you, but I am hyped. And when I get hyped, I get thirsty.
At last.
For knowledge.
Yes.
So obviously we are really happy to be teaming up with Audible for this video, which has the largest selection of audiobooks out there and a huge range of titles on a subject I am very interested in right now.
Yes.
Dragons.
Yes.
Want to get your jaws around some juicy dragon lore before 10.0 hits? Check out World of Warcraft Dawn of the Aspects, which follows everyone's favorite newly hot ex-boyfriend of Jaina's as he uncovers the shocking history of the original Aspects, including Alexstraza. It's a super relevant adventure on an epic scale. Audible also comes with tons of members' benefits you might not know about, including 1 free credit for their premium collection every month. May I suggest checking out Sylvanas, narrated by Sylvanas, Patty Matson, if you haven't yet, and unlimited access to their brand new Plus catalog, which has thousands of audiobooks, meditations, and even podcasts covering every aspect of popular culture and dragons. There is so much dragon content. I mean, a quick search of their catalog brings up over 4,000 results for dragons. Do with that what you will. So if you're the super studious lore master type or just really hot for our fire-breathing friends, you can get it all for free for 30 days by clicking on the link in the description, heading to audible.com/Taliesin Evitel, or texting, I know, right, Taliesin Evitel to 500. In the meantime, I'll be winging my way through the Audible catalog and getting stuck into some of these earworms. Check it all out for free at audible.com/Taliesin Evitel or text Taliesin Evitel to 500. Honestly, I could sit here talking about Audible all day, but I don't want this section to go on for too long.
And we see brave Stony Tony doing what no one else can and reactivating the beacon, or at least trying to, because the machinery is old and weathered too and doesn't want to turn on. The 2 split halves of the beacon refusing to fuse back together. And this really is coincidental, but when the beacon is split, it really brings to mind, to me, the hilt of a big sword that has been thrust into the Earth. That's just me. We have another super long close-up of Tony again finding the resolve to do what needs to be done. And honestly, and I know I'm not the first person to point this out, but there is more character and naked expression of intention displayed on Tony's face here than the jailer got in an entire expansion. It is so brilliant. And this whole situation kind of reminds me of an interview I remember going around at Legion time, where a dev said that the original concept of that cinematic was to focus on normal soldiers on both the Horde and Alliance sides, writing letters home as they prepared to fight the burning Legion on the broken shore. And I often think about that idea that never made it into the final film, and how awesome that focus on the nameless, everyday heroes of Azeroth would have been, instead of the kings and queens that we got. I can definitely see why they decided not to do that with the Legion cinematic in the end, but the great news is that we have it here, in Tony, the people's hero, who, just like the dragons at the beginning of the cinematic, heads towards the danger without a second thought. And I think that's so great. As he climbs the beacon, the weight of his own stone body cracks apart his aging and weather-beaten form, the tower itself crumbling under his touch. But the music here is driving, vigilant. It's not, for example, a suspenseful score suggesting that he might fail, but a triumphant one, celebrating his tenacity and his heart. There's an Overwatch-style trumpet in there, which is quite fitting since this entire scenario brings to mind May's cinematic, where she also conquers her fear to scale a big tower and get it working again. As Tony strains to force the two halves of the beacon back together and the power of the Titan artifact meteorites back into the ground, doesn't draw power from the ground, it puts power into the ground. It's worth noting the green glow in the air visible through the clouds here, which initially really confused me. I was like, wait, are the legions still here? But taking the time to look at it closer later, I can see it's much more stylistic than that. What is actually being shown in this shot, and it's brilliant, as the beacon is fixed, are the green, blue, red, and bronze of the 4 remaining Dragonflights. Don't forget, the island is waking up because they are trying to return. As the beacon is fixed, so they will find their way through, and this is a subtle foreshadowing of that. It's like those flights are behind these clouds, waiting for Tony to heroically light the beacon and let them in. Actually, it's not like that. That's exactly what's happening, and this is a nice visual representation of it. The green and blue clouds are even vaguely dragon-shaped. Again, a visual language rather than something literal, but it hammers the point home nonetheless. And though the Force is literally tearing Tony apart here, he is the hero we need. He completes the Herculean task, the Force throwing him backwards off the tower. And as he falls, he sees the clouds clearing and the blue sky beyond. We see the color returning to the environment, and as Tony, the last watcher of the Dragon Isles, falls to his death far below, he closes his eyes, content that he has fulfilled his duty, his sole purpose, and is happy in his last moments, the absolute king. What happens next? Well, I said this isn't a reaction video, and it's not, but I think I want to show you my stream reaction to this. No, Tony! Don't worry about the beacon, Tony, just survive! Oh, shit. No, Tony! Expansion ruined. Tony. As at the very last, Tony is plucked out of the air by Alexstrasza, and we get what in basically 20 years and countless beautiful cinematics for this game is, in my opinion, the most pure and euphoric sequence I have ever seen in this game. Beginning with this close-up of Alexstrasza and the look of pure, goofy joy on her face, followed by the playful, swooping roll, the awe on Tony's face as the dragons break through the clouds, the sun at their backs, giving them almost the halos of saviors, and being the reverse of the shot that showed them leaving at the beginning of the cinematic. The sense of freedom and movement as we soar alongside the returning dragons, their arrival bringing life back to the Isles, the canals bursting forth again as they fly overhead.
The world is healing, but her fate is yet uncertain.
And this idea that if Dragonflight really is an expansion which aims to celebrate the essence of WoW and fantasy, then it's not just the dragons coming home in this moment, it's all of us, the players too, back to exploring the wonders of Azeroth and its majesty. My favourite shot is Alexstrasza zooming over and under the features of the Isle in pure celebration.
Together, we shall be Azeroth's protectors once again.
Her back catching the cascading water in her wings and spraying it outwards in a mirror of Ysera's death cinematic in Legion. Here, an expression of life and vitality and hope and healing and rebirth. And honestly, I don't think there has ever been another 60 seconds in any World of Warcraft cinematic that has made me feel this flat out happy, you know, just happy. And I've watched this bit like 100 times now, and every time it triggers the exact same emotional response. Just a massive smile, and even sometimes a slight catching of breath. I think this is just one of the purest distillations of so much that I love about fantasy that I've ever seen, and I adore it. And the visuals are stunning, but also the music is completely unique in terms of wow. The theme playing here is an entirely new motif, and if it is indeed the new Dragonflight theme, then holy shit is this expansion off to an already incredible start, because it slaps so hard. And if the new Dragonflight system in Dragonflight is even a 10th as exciting as this, then I am all in 1000%.
Here, the new age of dragons shall begin.
The final shot of Alexstrasza landing on the tower with Tony, who will now definitely become a real and much-loved character like Zakan before him, is brilliant and everything my heart needs. But let me put my YouTuber hat back on for a second and look at what Alexstrasza says here. The world is healing, but her fate is yet uncertain. Together, we shall be Azeroth's protectors once again. Here, the new age of dragons shall begin. Because there's been some discussion of this. At the end of Cataclysm, the dragon aspects give up their immortality and much of their power, and we are told the Age of Dragons is over. The Age of Mortals is beginning. And, I mean, if it's the Age of Dragons again now, then by my reckoning, that means the Age of Mortals lasted all of what, 5 expansions? Basically my 20s. Bit of a piss take, Alexstrasza, if I'm going to be honest. But the way I thought of it when I first heard it is that it's not the return of the previous Age of Dragons, but like, you know, dragons still exist. They are still having their own new age alongside and as part of the Age of Mortals. I mean, if they've given up their immortality, they are mortals themselves. And that's what she's referring to. Like, what happens to the dragons after the Age of Dragons? This. We're about to find out. It's an incredible cinematic. I like it more genuinely every time I see it. It's obviously a winner, but what can it tell us about the upcoming expansion? Well, that dragons are extremely cool, obviously, but also Steve Danusa referred to old enemies returning throughout the expansion, and I think there are certainly some clues to that. Like I've mentioned, there's the fact that without the dragons present, the power of the elementals certainly seems to be getting busy and prominent. The images of lava wildly lapping around the walls of Tyrshold can't fail to remind us of that historic battle between Tyr and Ragnaros. There's the fact that this specific Titan architecture is so reminiscent of Ulduar, and with the original concept for the Dragon Isles back in vanilla being a zone full of old god temples, what significance could that hold? There's that magical blue glowing water. Is that just a sign that the dragons are returning? Is it another representation of the elemental strength building? Or could it even be connected to Ashara in some way? And then there's that music choice that I just can't stop thinking about. The Dragonblight music used to show us Tony and then the whole of the Dragon Isles waking up. I've suggested some reasons that music may have been chosen earlier, but there is another possibility too. Why would they want to plant the seed of association in our brains of Dragonblight and things waking up? What could be waking up in Dragonblight? Galakrond. The answer is Galakrond. His bones are in Dragonblight. He could be waking up, and he would make a very obvious big bad for this expansion, frankly. And that could be important as to why the dragons have chosen to return now too. Because, don't forget, the implication is that life has returned to the Dragon Isles because the dragons have come back, not the other way around. So why did they wait so long? I mean, you could argue that only very recently has the overall Legion threat that they left the Isle to deal with in the first place been properly solved once and for all. And then when it was they had to help out in the Chamber of the Heart, holding back N'Zoth for a bit. And so this is actually the first real chance they've had. And that does make sense, certainly. I buy that. It could also be specifically because there is a dragon-centric threat, like Galakrond, on the horizon, that they know they will need the power of the Isles to deal with. Honestly, I think much of this will be explained fairly simply and early in the opening, like, quests or lines of dialogue in this expansion, but some of it might well take a bit longer to come out, so it's fun to think about. All eyes shall be opened. There's also, if you want to go very meta, and you know I love going meta, another interpretation of this entire cinematic that I think it's fun to bring up. We know that with Dragonflight, Blizz are purposely trying to appeal to an old school fantasy vibe, almost a more simple, golden WoW time in a way, and with that in mind, isn't Stony Tony kind of all of us? Living in this great game where everything was awesome and sunny and great, because the game was better and also because we were 15, and then one day you wake up and you suddenly realise your guild has died. Half of your friend list hasn't been online in months or years. You don't really connect with the story, and even though you struggle on by yourself, it gets to the point where it feels like it's all just fallen to shit. Only for the awesome Dragon expansion to come and save the day, bringing the fun and the colour and the cool, uncomplicated fantasy vibes back into your little island. Sounds good to me. But what did you think of the cinematic? Did it push the necessary hype buttons to get you through the next few long months or years to release? Was there any reference or foreshadowing that you picked up on that I missed? It's very likely. Where does this rank in the pantheon of WoW expansion cinematics, and what are your hopes for Dragonflight? Let us know in the comments below. And thanks for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make all of our work happen. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Stony Tony. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evertel and Nyrin too, and Penny too. Until next time, cheerio!